I am joined here today by John from Adventure Plus. Hello, John.
Hi there, Andy. Good to
Uh,
see you.
right, now, Adventure Plus to me conjures up images of exciting adventure type stuff. But just give us, before we get into this, what a brief overview. What's Adventure Plus all about?
So essentially, we're an adventure youth work charity, and the original calling was to encourage young people to embrace the adventure of faith. So clearly, there's a Christian mission behind what we do, and that then takes the form of providing adventure activities for schools, youth groups, church groups, and so on. And then we run our own adventure holidays called Total Adventure. Total Adventure because it's about challenging and inspiring the whole person, physical, social, and spiritual.
We run a radio show called Endurance. Endurance is about faith versus fitness, and it's all off the back of 1 Timothy, that physical exercise is good, spiritual exercise is better. How does that kind of thing fit into everything you're doing with these young people?
Well, I'd say they both, in many ways, are hand in hand because actually it's all about life in all its fullness. And if we're physically healthy, we're going to be able to contribute more, enjoy life more, and then that links in very closely to spiritual well-being and emotional well-being too. Which again, it's all part of a continuum, isn't it, of being overly healthy or healthy overall, I should say, and that then enables us to, as I say, live life to the full and contribute in whatever ways we can to those around us, and of course focus on our spiritual health as well.
I suppose what I would look as obvious stuff. If we're physically exercising, we're burning off some of the bad stress stuff. We're putting some, endorphins into our system, so we're going to be naturally more happy. That I think we can kind of grasp that part. But how does that tie in for you to the exercise? So how do the endorphin bit? I think most of us would understand it. We go for a run, we go for a cycle, we feel better. But how do you then sort of mesh those two together in regards to what you're doing with young people?
Well, we don't really need to mesh them together. That's all part of the great design. That's God that came up with that one. From our point of view, it's then about getting out in another key element, I think, is out in the beauty of God's creation. So I think we can learn a lot about the character of the Creator God from this beautiful world that He's created. And creation is huge, massive, very beautiful, sometimes intimidating, and that's fine because our God is a great big God, as the song goes, and also intricately beautiful as well. So I think there's just a whole rounded healthy picture of getting out there, pushing ourselves possibly through adventure activities, out in a low stress, well ventilated, therefore healthy environment. And then of course there's the whole community side of things, of doing stuff with other people. So most of our adventure activities we'll deliver for groups of 10 to 12 young people and or adults, and or groups of dads with their lads or daughters, or mums with their sons and daughters. So actually it's about getting out there, doing stuff in the beauty of God's creation, in community as well. So it's a rounded picture, actually.
Wow. You've mentioned holidays. Do you do schools work as well? And we'll come back to the holidays, but is there sort of local church work, or is it more sort of supporting churches to do stuff? I mean, how do you do that part?
Yeah, I'd say there's 4 different approaches to the adventure work, youth work that we run. So the first and the biggest chunk is what we call group adventures. So that could be schools, youth groups, church youth weekends away, coming to stay on our purpose-built adventure centre, DOV expeditions as well, and also we run 1-to-1 weekends for a mum or a dad with one son or daughter, so they have a really special
Wow.
sort of adventure weekend to build memories together. I also started running active retreats. So actually it's not just for young people, but for adults, just to get away from the pressure of email and LinkedIn and so on. So just go on a 3 or 4 day journey out in the beauty of God's creation. So that's group adventures. And then we have a specialist unit working with young people at risk of exclusion from school, or referred to us by pupil referral units or social services, and have additional either behavioural or physical needs. And that's called Adventure Impact. And then for each of those groups that come to us, there's a pattern to the feedback. Here's a good way of picking this up. So one of the questions in our feedback form is, what was best about your stay? And the answer, Andy, could be anything: the climbing, the canoeing, the mountain biking, the archery, the bushcraft, the food, getting away from my annoying little brother or sister. I've seen them all those answers. What was worst about your stay? Far and away the most popular answer is, it had to end. We had to go home. So then we can say, do you know, it doesn't have to end. You can come back for a week in the summer or an Easter to our total adventure holidays for individuals. So that's the third approach. And that's really important, because then that provides the opportunity to keep in touch with young people right the way through their teenage years. Because for Total Adventure, the aim is to give them such a great time. They want to come back each year and come back as leaders when they're older. And that is absolutely what we see. And then finally, for young adults, school leaving age, we run an instructor training and discipleship gap year, which we call internally DISTILL, because the acronym is Discipleship Training Instructor and Leadership Program. So there you go. Yeah, you're right. It's being a resource for church youth work, because they can come and do stuff with A+ that they couldn't normally probably do because they wouldn't have the equipment or the qualified instructors. It's supportive youth work right the way through the teenage years for young people that want to get involved with Adventure Plus on our own holidays. And then it's instructor training for young adults as well. And then an opportunity for volunteering to help all this happen. So we have about 200 volunteers on our list as well.
I love how you've got people who are coming through, they're experiencing you for the first time, perhaps as a very young person. And then later on, there's this, they're coming back, not just to partake, but to actually become a leader in it, which does say something of how much fun it is.
Oh, yeah. In fact, in our instructor training, we talk about the serious business of having fun, because that is the point. The activities are just an opportunity, a vehicle to get out, have a great time in friendship, to use the sort of the Christian phrase, but in fellowship and in community. Again, as I say, out in the beauty of God's creation, and to build relationship long term right the way through the teams. And what's actually even more exciting about that is, of course, quite a number of the young people who come to us first with their school wouldn't necessarily be thinking about going on a Christian summer holiday, because they're not from a church family or a Christian background. So they then think, well, hold on, will Fraser, will Emily be on that camp? I had a great time with them as my instructors. With my school, yes, they will. Right, I'm coming back. And so that's a real opportunity to carve out into the community as outreach to young people who wouldn't necessarily think of going on a Christian adventure holiday.
Fab. So what's your role within Adventure Plus? Do you work for them? Is this your little baby? I mean, where do you fit with Adventure Plus?
It's certainly not my little baby. We work with about 8,000 children and young people a year, wow. So that's pretty big. Well, it's certainly pretty busy. I was involved in setting it up. There was a very clear calling, as I think I might have said earlier, at the outset, which was completely unexpected, to encourage young people to embrace the adventure of faith. So that is what A+ is all about. We have a team of probably about, it's a movable feast, depends on the time of year and so on, but between 25 and 30. That includes instructors, admin team. We've now got a medium-sized conference centre on the farm that we've managed to buy. Wow. To build a cutting-edge adventure centre. Maybe we'll talk about that in a bit. So that includes then hospitality and housekeeping and chef and all the rest of it. So we're quite a small team to activate that many young people and run a conference centre.
Well, yeah, let's go to the conference centre. Yeah. So you've got a farm, you've bought out. I guess it's going to be an ever ongoing modification, isn't it, as you change and adapt and refresh and all the rest of it. But what's the story behind that?
Well, the story behind that is, why get a centre in the first place? Because property is expensive and takes a lot of energy. But we started actually as youth workers in inner London, in Camden, London Borough of Westminster, linked to a church community centre called the Clubhouse, which was linked to All Souls Church that I was a member of as a student. And we basically wanted to be within 90 minutes of the Telecom Tower, so young people from inner London could get out to us easily at the weekend without a 4-hour minibus drive to classic adventure locations like the Brecon Beacons or the Peak District or the West Country. So we're in Oxfordshire. We're also therefore 90 minutes from inner Birmingham and the Bull Ring, and we do a lot of work with young people from Birmingham, Coventry, West Midlands and so on, which is just great. And we started really small. So first year was a group out from Brixton to come and stay with us. So that year we worked with about 40 young people. And then it grew over the years. We grew our team. We were working with 1,000 kids and young people by the year 2000. And then, Andy, it went ballistic. So it doubled in 1 year to then 2,000 children and young people, then 3,000, then 4,000. By 2006, we're working with 6,000 children and young people from rented accommodation out here in Oxfordshire. So we had offices and an agricultural barn full of boats, bows and arrows, bikes, walking boots, anything beginning with B that you can have fun with. But then it just ceilinged. However hard we work, we were still working with 6,000 children and young people each year. And we were seeing young people really encouraged. We were seeing young people come to faith. We were seeing young people want to come back year in, year out. And so we did want to reach more young people. And we realized the only way to do that was to try and identify a property to build our own centre, so that rather than us packing stuff in our minibuses and going to meet people at a school that we'd hired for summer camps or by the river or wherever it may be, actually young people are coming to us. And then we could build really great facilities as well. So bit of a journey around, if we're looking for a property to build an adventure centre, what do we need? So the shopping list wasn't too challenging. We wanted enough space to get out in the beauty of God's creation, because you could run all our activities, if it was like a fairground ride on 2 football pitches with a little archery range and a little mountain bike tricky trail and a climbing wall in the corner, but that's not really the point. So enough space, enough built form for wet weather activities, housing on site for our gap year instructor team. So we've got 2 cottages on the site with mature woodland for bushcraft, because you can't just magic up tall trees, close to placid water for canoeing, kayaking, stand-up paddleboarding, all that kind of stuff. And then in Oxfordshire, because we wanted to be 90 minutes from London and Birmingham and Bristol, by the way, and Southampton. But anyway, in Oxfordshire and affordable. And you put those, and also getting the freehold, because we didn't want to just rent a property for 20 years and then at the end of it you set everything up, you got to move on. So that was a huge challenge. And I was registered with, all the big property agents, Stratton Parker, Savills, Knight Frank Rutley. And I was getting calls for, we've got exactly what you're looking for, Mr. Cox, and it's only £8 million, or here's a farm with a lake and a couple of tight cottages, only 4 million. I thought that's just not going to happen. And so in the end, in sort of desperation, I rang the owners of a local Christian conference centre close to us called Windmill Farm. And I just asked the owners, might they be interested in selling the 50-acre field with woods, with the cottages and a couple of barns on which we could build an event centre. And well, if you got time for a bit of a story, it was remarkable.
Go for it.
So in fact, they weren't living in Oxfordshire at the time. They'd left a team to run Windmill Farm Conference Centre, and they felt called to help the church up in Shetland, which incidentally is north of Oslo. So they're miles away. And I ran them completely out of the blue on a drizzly day from here in Oxfordshire to ask if they'd just be interested in selling those fields, the barn and the cottages. And they obviously very friendly, because I know them well. We already ran activities for groups that stay there. And they were quite polite. They said, but we weren't expecting this call. It's quite a big conversation. We'll be back in touch, Jonathan, when we're back down south, if there's anything to talk about. And I put the phone down and I thought, okay, it's back to Knight Frank and Rutley and Stratton Parker, because that's going nowhere. I was amazed to hear Richard, the farmer from Shetland, on the phone to me the following Monday morning, the very next week, calling me. And he said, Jonathan, we were gobsmacked by your phone call. And I said, yeah, I understand. You weren't, obviously you've been on that farm for generations. You're not just going to. They said, no. We had a family meeting just last week, and our children are all grown up. No one's taken on the farm. No one's taken on the conference centre. We're moving out. So you buying just that field and those cottages and those 2 barns doesn't really work. It'll only work if you buy us out of the whole lot, which includes then a purpose-built conference centre with twin ensuite bedrooms, a kitchen that will cook for up to 500, a sports hall with a climbing wall in it that we designed for them 8 years before. I mean, as an American friend of mine says at times like this, he punched me on the arm and said, mere coincidence, John, don't let it build your faith, because this is remarkable. So There is a bit of a story around how that's happened, but we've ended up buying the whole farm with the conference centre and actually a farmhouse, 5-bedroom farmhouse, which is great. It's on Airbnb or I'll forget the name of it, but it's on. If anyone wants to come and stay in a lovely rural farmhouse in Oxfordshire, get in touch with Adventure Plus and we'll tell you about it. So we've ended up buying the farm now, and yeah, I could tell you what we're doing with that, but we've now ended up with a 50-acre farm to build a cutting-edge carbon neutral adventure centre on it for young people.
Wow, I loved part of what you said, which really strikes chord with me when you said we were waiting for all these people that went down the normal route, all these big estate agents. I know those estate agents as well. And then you said, out of desperation, I spoke to the person.
Yeah.
And it's that desperation part. And I think sometimes that's what God does, doesn't he? We go down the normal route. Okay, we've got to find money and invest and buy, but God has the better route, which maybe we're less comfortable with to begin with. But you know what? It's so much better.
Yeah, well, it's been amazing because it wouldn't have happened through that commercial route at all. And the property we're on is remarkable. And there've been already, I mean, we've now moved onto it 8 years ago. And already there have been remarkable additional provisional answers to prayer, which means that we've now got affordable, accessible accommodation in unique timber yurts and cabins for 100 young people. That bit's already built, and we're now about to embrace the next exciting phase, which is the affordable, accessible adventure facilities. So yeah, it's really exciting. We've just run our own 2 summer camps on site for 109 8 to 12-year-olds a week and a half ago. So if I'm looking a bit spaced, that's why. And then last week we had about 60 teens on camp with a brilliant team of about 20 volunteers to help manage a really excellent week for them too.
Fab. So you said that, just going back a little bit about you were part of forming this because there was this call in your life. What's your involvement day to day now?
Well, I aim to lead the team, but we're very much a team. So yeah, technically I'm a founder director of Adventure Plus, but I'm also quite involved in delivering the training for our instructors. So I've been doing this for 30 years. So Adventure Plus actually began when we were in a 2-bedroom flat in central London back in 1990. And Andy, how would you go about setting up an adventure centre with no background in adventure youth work and no background in adventure activities and very little background in youth work from a 2-bedroom flat in central London? I've got no idea, but there have been so many examples of clear guidance and God's faithfulness and provision along the way that here we are now with this farm in Oxfordshire working with 9,000 children and young people a year. Amazing. So yeah, obviously over the years I've had to get myself qualified. So I'm a mountain leader, I'm a climbing instructor, I'm a whitewater canoe and kayak senior instructor, but also I train instructors. I'm the loneliest sea kayak senior instructor in the country because I live in Oxford. You can't be, well, Whitney, you can't really be further from the sea. But it's great actually to be able to run things like an introduction to sea kayak camping once a year for adults or young people. So yeah, in fact, we also do a fundraiser every 2 years because it takes a lot of organising, called Whitney to Westminster. So I live in a town called Whitney, and we canoe all the way to London with up to 30 people in open canoes. And the last day of that, from Teddington downstream, it's tidal. So in actual fact, having the sea kayak qualification, I think, is really relevant to understanding the tides, which are quite complicated in London, to be fair. And I'm a big believer in being not just about qualified, but we want to be, more than is required in every aspect of what we want to be, the best in all that we do. In fact, our mission statement as an organisation is to deliver the best possible course in line with each client's needs and be a credible Christian witness in all we do. So that's what we're about. So yeah. So I deliver instructor training for our team. I deliver instructor training for other Christian event centres and others, and I lead the team. Obviously, as the founder and chief exec, I'm involved in fundraising and so on as well. And if anyone listening wants to get involved in helping us create an awesome, cutting edge Christian adventure centre, which will impact thousands of children and young people a year, we'd love to hear from you because we've got a huge job on. We've now got 80 acres. That's another story. I said 50 acres earlier. That's what we bought. We've now got 80 acres. There's a story behind that, and we want to put in the only inland artificial coast steering facility in the UK. We're about to dig a 4-acre lake on the site, which will also then become the hill, because we'll be digging up 100,000 tons of spoil, which will then stay on the site. It's a very flat site. Before we put the hill on, we want to put a caving trail on the ground, which will then be covered by the hill, and then it'll be underground. So yeah, loads of exciting stuff about to happen. Anyone listening wants to get involved, it's far too big an adventure for us to keep to ourselves. So yeah, come and get involved, volunteer, support us. If you've got any building expertise, QSing expertise, want to help us with the build of the project, that could be really exciting too.
I love how you said, how do you do this from a flat in inner city London? But I mean, Pure 24/7 radio was growing out of 3 people saying you should launch your own station. I don't have a background in radio, and here we are 1 year on, basically still doing what we believe God called us to do, and still having so many opportunities opening up. And I think when you're walking with God, he will provide opportunities, and far more than we think. We don't have to push those doors. God kind of opens them up. Yes, we might knock a door, but work hard is my thing, but not push hard, because we can make opportunities that God didn't have for us.
Yeah. And also, I think when you set out on that adventure of faith, so you're an adventure of faith too with your team at Pure Radio, aren't you? And
yeah.
And so, yeah, as you say, you can relate to that. But as you step out, there is no way of telling what the next chapter will be, who God's got in line to be in touch, if only you'll step out in faith. One of my favorite verses, which you'll relate to, I'm sure, related to this, is Ephesians 2:10, that we're God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to perform good works that have been prepared in advance for us to do. And I wonder sometimes how many of us miss the challenge, the calling, because it just takes maybe that step of faith initially. But of course, as you step out, God does have those in place to lead and guide and provide. But you'll never find that out if you don't take that step in the first place.
Amen to that.
So that I think is a big part of the background to the whole point of the adventure of faith, which was our initial calling. Because I think some people view, if you need God, if you need Christianity, if you need religion to get through life, it's a crutch to sort of help you through, and that's all it is. I found it to be quite the opposite. I think it's as you step out in relationship, because it's about relationship with God, not religion, right? As you step out in faith, then actually the adventures just grow, and it takes you into far more challenging places than you would have been if you just maybe laid low and didn't have the courage to. We often talk with young people about 2 things from Ephesians 3, I think it is, that we're called to bow the knee and then look up. For every family in heaven and earth, we're called to kneel before the Father, and only then can we know the fullness of living with God, praying that we would be strengthened by his Spirit in the inner person, to then know how wide and deep and high and broad is the love of God. But the first thing in that is to kneel and offer our lives for what he's got for us.
Yeah, it's that offering, which is so important. Which leads me on to this one nicely. So you're talking about faith, talking about adventure. What's your own story of faith? What's your background? How did you come into that relationship with Jesus Christ?
Yes. I grew up in a Christian family, went to a pretty average, if that's an appropriate phrase, just C of E church in North London growing up. But to be honest, it was the sort of, we just did that as a routine on a Sunday, and then you got a good Sunday lunch because mum was a great cook. And it didn't really sort of come alive for me until I got to sort of the stage in life where you're thinking about what's it all about. And so I'm thinking about, I'm doing my A-levels. Am I going to go to uni? And I was really challenged by what's the point of it all? Because if all goes well and I, maybe go to uni or get a good job, marry a beautiful wife, we have beautiful kids, we get older, they grow up, they get a good job, marry beautiful people, have kids, and you just drop off the end of the conveyor belt. Well, what is the point of all that? And I was really challenged by that. And then my godmother sent me a bit of a classic I guess some of your listeners will relate to. A lot of people of our sort of generation, well, my generation, I'm not including you in that, would have read The Cross and the Switchblade and then Run Baby Run, the sort of companion story to that. And in that, clearly, if that was true, God was answering prayer. There's, either the guy's telling the truth and the book came across as authentic. And if so, there are clearly answers to prayer there, both from Nicky Cruise's point of view and David Wilkerson's. And if God's answering prayer, then God is real. And in that case, that sort of went a long way to answering the question for me of what's the point. And then I felt, well, I really want to be part of something bigger that really counts, rather than just get a job, get a big mortgage and be insured to the hilt and marry somebody beautiful, which I did. That's wonderful. And we got beautiful kids and all that. But actually, obviously, the whole basis of that has changed. So I had no idea what I wanted to do when I left school, but I think I felt I wanted to travel. So the two options for me at the time seemed to be either the forces, and I applied for the Admiralty Interview Board because I also like the sea and ships and all that kind of thing, or nursing, and then you can clearly travel with that. But nursing at the time wasn't very cool amongst my schoolmates. It was before Casualty and the male charge nurse on there, so it really wasn't a sort of cool blokey thing to do. But actually, it was the first thing I ever really prayed about. And when I literally got out of bed, David Wilkerson style, knelt by my bed and prayed. And I said, look, Lord, if you're listening, this is your chance, because I'm now listening to, which is the appalling way round to view it. But, anyway, I prayed really hard for about 4 or 5 minutes, which seemed a very long time. Is it going to be nursing or is it going to be the Navy? And I thought I saw a Royal Naval frigate ploughing through the water towards me. I thought it's going to be the Navy, or I don't know. I thought I heard a voice that said no, it should be nursing. But I knew that was just me really wanting an answer. And then I sort of gave up praying after maybe 5 or 6 minutes. I gave up trying and I was just getting into bed. And I just had this real sense of warmth and peace wash over me. And I knew that I would do nursing, and that was the right thing. I didn't hear a voice, didn't see a low-flying syringe coming at me from the left field. I just knew that nursing was going to be the right thing. And on the strength of that, I applied to study nursing in Whitechapel at the Royal London Hospital, as it is now. And then when I qualified, after nearly a year in the casualty department there, which is a great experience for life in general, and also really good first aid practical experience for now what we do with adventure activities, not that we need it too often. And then I applied for various sort of Christian relief and mission agencies to work overseas, and I ended up in Sudan for a year as a health teacher and community development worker. And I won't go into too much detail now because we could talk all day about this, but we saw some absolutely amazing answers to prayer out there in a situation where the situation was much bigger than the resources we had. We saw some amazingly clear answers to prayer that really encouraged me in my faith and definitely saved hundreds and ultimately thousands of lives. And then I came back to the UK, to London, to study environmental sciences, because as a health teacher, one of the regular messages are you've got to eat a more varied diet and you want to aim to drink cleaner water. But if you can't tell people what crops will grow in their soil type, in that climate, or how to purify the water with locally available materials, then it's only half the story. So I was set to come back to London to study environmental sciences. And I came back to London, met a mate from school that I hadn't seen for 4 or 5 years while I'd been away doing nursing. And we got chatting, and he asked me what I'd been up to. And I shared a couple of stories about, life in, working in a big casualty department in a busy teaching hospital in London. And then some of the time in Sudan, and a couple of the answers to prayer. And I said, how about you? What have you been up to? And his face just drained of sort of enthusiasm and sort of just, he just looked really deflated. He said, John, there's got to be more to life than this. He wasn't unemployed or an employment casualty. He'd had a weekly paid job ever since we both left school. And, maybe the first 3 months, that's quite fun. You got a wad of cash in your back pocket, drinks from me, lads, well, hey, but this is now 5 years on. And he's, life just seemed to be really empty. And that really challenged me, having just come back from Sudan in an amazing situation where we saw God working in amazing ways, to then meet this guy, perfectly, intelligent, decent bloke, just bored with life, in a very ordinary North London suburb where I grew up, whatever ordinary means. Really challenged me and drove even me to prayer that evening. Just, the tension between seeing God work in sovereign ways in sort of high adventure environment, and this guy and most people walking down our high street on a Saturday afternoon as if God doesn't even exist, really challenged me. And the response I got was, so what are you going to do about it? To encourage young people here in the UK to embrace the adventure of faith. Yeah, that's the link. That's sort of how A Plus started.
Wow. There's a lot there which we could unpack for a long time, and I would be happy to do that another time.
Sure.
But I love some of those answers to prayer. I love some of those little moments of, I suppose, reality checks is how you might put that. Something happens, it's just, what am I doing this for? And then you see other people and think, well, there's got to be more. And actually, I love that question of God saying, well, what are you going to do? And I'm guessing over time, Adventure Plus is what came out of, well, this is what I'm going to do. This is my offering.
That's right. But it wasn't very helpful in the sense of what on earth do you do with that? So I was, here's the first sort of step. I mentioned clear guidance along the way. I've only been back at this time from Sudan for 2 weeks. And this sort of prayer happened, and I had a sense that this was authentic. It was of God, but where do you go with that? I had no background in adventure activities at that point, and no background in youth work. And I prayed a bit more, and I said, look, if this is really from you, then please provide me with contacts to show me what it is you want us to do, because there must be people running adventure holidays and I don't know, youth adventures in the UK already. I didn't know any of them at all. I do now, obviously. And with that, I sort of left it and went to bed. I thought, well, the ball's in God's court now. It's up to him to provide the right contacts. As it happens, one of the other nurses on our team in Sudan, who's Canadian, was coming back through London, flying on her way back to Canada, and she'd arranged a couple of weeks to take some R&R in London, and was meeting two friends the next morning who were flying over with their bicycles from Calgary in Western Canada. And they said to me, John, don't go out this morning because Mike and Steve are going to be calling in at the house we were staying at. It was my girlfriend at the house, at her family's house. So Tessa, now my wife, and Pat, the nurse, were going out to do some shopping. John, don't go out because Mike and Steve are going to pitch up. About 11 o'clock, the doorbell rang. There's two guys on there. They got off the plane and got on their bicycles and cycled from Heathrow. I thought that was brilliant in itself. I made them laugh straight away because they've been bet by their Canadian friends. The first thing any Brit's going to say to you is, do you want a cup of tea? So I said, guys, you're going to need a cup of tea. Come on in. And I got the kettle on. They're sitting in this little kitchen in the house there. This has all happened the night before, this calling to me to encourage young people to embrace the adventure of faith. And I said, please provide us with the contacts to show us what you might want us to do. I got the kettle on and I said, so just absentmindedly, what do you guys do for a job? And the first one said, I run in a Christian adventure summer camp in Canada. And obviously in Canada. And I put the kettle down. I said, that's ridiculous. Oh, well, gee, thanks, mate. What's so ridiculous about it? And I explained. I mean, this was crazy timing. And so they stayed with us for about 2 weeks. And in the end, they invited us out to Birch Bay Ranch summer camp near Edmonton in Alberta, Canada, the following summer. And that really gave us the blueprint of what we're now creating here on our adventure base in Oxfordshire.
How fabulous that God provides such a perfect person for you.
Amazing, yeah.
That's, I mean, the thing is, we're talking about physical adventure, canoeing, rock climbing, whatever, but as amazing that it is, I always think, well, the exciting journey for me, and then which is why I'm so privileged to get people to tell their stories, is the adventure of their own personal story of life and faith interaction with God, and just how he sets these things up and effectively sets us up in order to do what he's asking us to do. And the fact that you didn't know, for me, you're the perfect person, because at that point, you've got two choices: give up or go to God and say, what do we do? And actually then you're being far more inspired. Nothing wrong with qualifications and skills. They're brilliant. But sometimes the best people are the ones who aren't qualified and aren't skilled, because their qualification and skills come from a heart for God and serving God. And then we go back to him and say, I don't know how to do this, Lord. How do I do? And it's in some ways actually I think a bit easier to be led at that point by the working of the Holy Spirit, by God, to do His will.
Yeah. And of course, at that time, there were no qualifications. I'd never, I wasn't a mountain leader or a climber or a canoeist at all. I don't think I'd ever been in a canoe. Well, I had once, but it didn't end well. So that was like years before. So you're absolutely right. And all the equipping needed to happen. I don't have one right here. I could grab one in 20 seconds, and Andy, but if we're about encouraging young people to embrace the adventure of faith, there have been so many examples like that of really clear guidance that we really needed, that I felt we really ought to get our story down, just by way of encouraging the 7, 8, 9,000 children and young people we work with each year. It varies a bit each year. Because although God will have a different adventure for each of them, a different calling, a different adventure of faith for each of them, it's the same faithful God. So about 7 or 8 years ago, I ended up trying to capture all that in a book called Life to the Max, John 10:10. So yeah, if people want to catch up on some of those amazing answers to prayer that really got my attention and saved hundreds of lives in Sudan, and then the journey, having then decided, okay, I'm not going to get a proper job, I'm just going to try and pursue this, setting up this Adventure Youth Work charity, and the amazing provision along the way. It's on Amazon. It's called Life to the Max. Grab a copy. The idea is that actually it's written in such a way that it would be really great maybe for a godson or goddaughter, or someone who either is a young Christian or isn't a Christian. It's not very jargony Christiany. Hopefully it's an engaging story of an adventure of faith.
Wow. I'm writing a similar book at the moment about our first 12 months, which I'm not going to talk about here, because
I'll trade you. Send it through. I'd love to read it.
No, definitely. I think because my inspiration, I think, is the disciples are in a boat. Jesus is in the water, and one of them, with great trepidation, steps onto the water gingerly and tries to walk forwards. And I want to encourage people, for the calling God's put on their life, not to step out of the boat, but to jump out of the boat. Because if that water is good enough to walk on, it's good enough to build a castle on, And it's like, let's build firm foundations, because if that's where God wants you to put a foundation, just go for it. Don't walk with fear, walk with confidence, because if that's where God's calling you, He will equip you for all that He has for you, which is the important part we sort of forget about, which doesn't mean to say it'll be successful. It means the success is in actually serving God. So anyway, I'll leave that because it's...
Well, no, but actually picking up on that, there's that wonderful verse, isn't there? Is it early Colossians? I should know, and I think I do, that He who called you is faithful and will bring it to completion. He who began a good work in you is faithful and will bring it to completion. It isn't Colossians, but so that is classic. But of course, the good work that He will bring to completion isn't the founding of a radio station.
Nope.
Primarily, or the building of an event centre. It's actually the good work that He begins in the hearts of those who then hear as a result of that, and brings bringing them home to completion, which is wonderful. There's that brilliant book, isn't there, Andy, which I'm sure you know. If you want to walk on water, you've got to get out of the boat.
Yep.
I think it's John Ortberg, isn't it?
I know the book.
Anyone listening and can relate to this bit of what we're talking about, grab that book. If you want to walk on water, you've got to get out of the boat. It's a good one.
No, it's true. Right, let's come back to Adventure Plus then. So we are in, end of-ish, the summer of 2024. You talked about some building projects that are coming up, some extensions, a hill, which is cool. What are the next few months looking like for you as you come towards the end of the summer holidays here in the UK, which if you're not English, then that's probably kind of the end of July to start of September. That's when the children are off school. What sort of mid-September onwards going to be looking like for you?
Well, really exciting. We've got either 4 or 5 to be confirmed. New GAP team joining us, so they'll join us without any qualifications, and we train them up quite intensively right the way through to Easter. And so by Easter, they will be fully qualified canoe instructor, kayak instructor, mountain bike leader, archery leader, fencing leader, climbing wall leader, expedition leader, obviously first aid, obviously safeguard training. So that's absolutely a great gap year, and it's wonderful to have those guys with us. I'm really excited that 3 of the 4 who joined our gap year last year have decided to stay on for a second year. So that tells me that that's been a great year. And the fourth guy, Finnin, we love him to bits. We're celebrating him moving on because he really loved our ski week that we run in February half term. He loves skiing, and he's going to do a week in the French Alps. A year in the French Alps, again on mission there. So he's really grown on and moving on from what we've begun with him in his gap year with us. So really excited. We pick up with a number of school residentials, again, year 6 residential, some secondary school residential weeks. And of course, on the last day of each of those, we say, do you know what, if you've enjoyed this, you can come back for a week next summer. We'll be preparing for our Adventures in Worship week in October half term for young Christian musicians who want to use maybe what they've learned in music lessons at school and in band practice or whatever it might be, grown the confidence to then use that in worship in their church. And I've got a number of professional Christian musicians that are helping me with that one, which is brilliant. And we'll be preparing for Total Adventures Ski, which is in February half term. So that's a great fun week. We rumble out of our Oxfordshire farmyard in 3 minibuses, drive to Dover, catch a midnight ferry, and then when we land in Calais, we're driving right through the night, and we're in the Swiss Alps by lunchtime, and we're there for a week skiing, and then we head on back north in time to catch the next half term before Christmas. So a lot going on, and preparing actually for the build, including some fundraising. The next big stage of the adventure base is to dig the lake, which may happen next summer. If not, it'll be the following summer. Another little bit of fantastic provision which is happening today on our site. Unfortunately, there's 1.5 kilometers of power lines across our site, including right where the lake's going to go. It's over £500,000 to bury and reroute those on the site. SSE, the electric company, are burying and rerouting them at the moment. In fact, they've nearly finished at their expense. All we needed to do was provide the trenching, which is still £80,000. It's a lot of money, but that's not £600,000 if you add those two together. So, you know, that's just phenomenal. So the big obstacle has been the overhead power lines. They're now moved and underground as well. So there's no overhead power lines on our site, which is just brilliant.
Wow. I've heard of God moving mountains. I've met people who've talked about their own literal mountains, but I mean, that's, in a sense, that is another mountain that God has orchestrated to be moved for you, which is phenomenal. John, just give us, if people want to get hold of you, find out about any of the amazing stuff going on, what's the website where people can come to?
Yeah, great. So obviously and just Google adventureplus.org.uk.
Fab. Thank you. There's so much going on in there. I mean, it's exciting to hear some of the activities you're doing, the interactions with young people and adults as well, which is great. My personal privilege is always finding out about people's story of faith, but really excitedly for me is how God is using you and your story, connecting you to a group of other people, and then this sort of bigger thing happened, which is bigger than any of us. And I love it. As scary as that was for us last year when we got bigger than just our little team, you know, and there's more people involved. It's a scary moment, but it's an exciting moment of seeing how God is at work. And I'm really grateful for your time today just to hear about what God's doing in Adventure Plus through your life and in your life and all that. It's amazing. Just give us that website one more time for folk.
Yeah, adventureplus.org.uk.
John, thank you.
Thank you. Great chatting, Andy.
Rated 5 stars by Sorted Magazine's film critic, Pure 247 takes you behind the scenes of the birth of a global Christian radio station. Andy B will have you laughing and crying as you discover what it takes to create ministry that matters in this inspiring tale of perseverance, honesty, and vulnerability. Buckle up and get ready for a story that's uplifting as it is entertaining. Behind the microphone, they face bankruptcy, eviction, and 2 life-changing surgeries. Can they make it? Will they make it? Get your copy of this life-changing book today. Pure 247 is available now on Amazon. Andy B is best described as a man after God's own heart, who insists that God's vision and resourcing trump all handicaps.